Lawyers on behalf of Judges Secretary Andiswa Mengo, the complainant in the landmark sexual harassment probe against Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge, says the misconduct finding against the top judge actually affirms his conduct was in fact improper. The Judicial Conduct Tribunal recommended a lighter sanction against Mbenenge, whom it had found had initiated and conducted a flirtatious relationship with Andiswa Mengo in the workplace. The tribunal concluded that the conduct amounted to misconduct, but not gross misconduct. In its report, the tribunal also found that Mengo had lost credibility for giving false testimony. The recommendation will now go to the Judicial Services Commission, which then will consider it and issue a final finding against the judge. In a statement, Mengo's legal team, the Women's Legal Center, said their client retains the right to consider further legal recourse, including, of course, the possibility of taking the tribunal's findings on review. Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo is the Director of Wise4Afrika, and she joins us now to weigh in on the recommendations outcome of the Mbenenge Tribunal. Advocate Brenda, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So talk to us about your first reaction when you heard about this verdict against Mbenenge.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Listen, I called it in the many interviews that I did last year that his lawyers were actually making sure and to ensure that they get a lesser conviction, which is the misconduct, and that does not lead to impeachment, right? So they have managed to do that and done it successfully. There was no way that they were not going to put up a fight to ensure that the judge president of the Eastern Cape is found with gross misconduct that then leads to impeachment. That was not what they were gunning for. They were looking for a lesser charge, and that's what they got.
So in essence, Advocate, what does this then mean for women in similar circumstances and cases in their places of work? Does this ultimately mean that the issue of a senior employee who initiates and maintains a flirtatious relationship with their subordinates are basically scot-free, even though constitutionally this is incorrect?
So this case has done a number of things for us. It has brought certain aspects of sexual harassment, how it manifests itself and how it's treated. So firstly, for me, is that we all need to accept and acknowledge that the complaint was failed by the Judicial Service Commission, because the complaint was laid 2-3 years ago. They sat on it and did absolutely nothing, right? So you are denied access to justice for a good 2 years to 3 years. Eventually, when the matter is given attention and then a tribunal is appointed, you are then exposed and subject to the line of questioning that she underwent, right? So it does a lot of things to many. It says to those who find themselves in the place of work that if you do complain about unwanted, unwelcome behavior, it might be deemed to be flirtatious, right? So we are not going to dig deep and understand that it is conduct unbecoming that brings an organization into disrepute, and it is gross misconduct, because under normal circumstances, and let's argue that the findings of the tribunal, as they say, that the complainant contradicted herself, she gave false testimony. Surely, by just with what Judge Mbenenge said in his testimony, that he could say certain things in the workplace to the complainant that were unwelcome and unbecoming of a profession or a professional, that in itself should have led the tribunal to hold him to see that conduct as gross misconduct. Let's leave aside all the WhatsApp messages that happened at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and let's, as I argue, that we take this whole thing that the tribunal is saying that she contradicted herself and she gave false testimony. There are things that were accepted by Judge President Mbenenge of his conduct, of his behavior, and literally said to all of us that it was a cultural issue, right? So you can behave inappropriately in the workplace and bring in culture as a defense for your gross misconduct.
I'm very glad that you mentioned that point, Advocate, because I'm actually coming to it, right? And also, maybe also just give us a bit of clarification around what the law actually stipulates when it comes to withdrawal of consent, right? Advocate, we live in a country plagued by GBV and femicide, a historically patriarchal society.
Right.
And looking at the current laws, how do you then see this impacting the very way society deals with such matters in the future in general?
And it's about time. So I've looked at social media this morning, and predominantly our male counterparts in this country are rejoicing over this finding and this report, right?
Yes.
They are actually making derogatory remarks about women, right? That women trap them, that women come up with false pregnancies, and that they want Judge Mbenenge to sue Mengo, right? So that's the attitude that we have, right? Of people who don't understand when consent when consent starts and stops, right? That they think they're entitled to our bodies, and they're the only ones who can determine what consent looks like and when you give it, and they are the only ones who can tell you whether you have given consent or not given consent. So we've got the Coco judgment that put that to bed, that there is no implied consent, right? So you cannot say to me, because I allowed you to kiss me and I conceded and I to kissing, and that kissing was licensed to you to further have sex with me without my permission, my consent. So we know that the law has stated that categorically without any confusion. We know it, right? So if at any stage the complainant, being Mengo in this case, did indicate that this behavior is making it uncomfortable, is enough. Whether she at some point it was false what she said, but you are able to see in that value chain that at some point in the interconnectedness and the when they were engaging when she was engaging with Judge President Mbenenge, that at some point she was literally saying to the men, please stop, right? And so if this tribunal did not look into all those facts in their entirety and in total, I'm a bit concerned, and we are going to be supportive of the Legal Resource Center, and we're going to be reaching out to them to find a way of all of us being part of the review process, because it has to be challenged. This just them finding him guilty of misconduct, it is a concession that he did something wrong, and he cannot continue to sit on the bench with that kind of behavior. This is the man who, we are told, because he has been found guilty of a lesser charge, he's going back to work, right? So he can continue to behave in that manner because it's also cultural. I mean, I can't be challenged because it's cultural.
Wow.
So if I keep on admiring and looking at your shirt, looking at your boobs, it's cultural at work.
Absolutely unacceptable. I'm sorry to laugh, Advocate, but I mean, we saw that shocking testimony of that judge having to explain some emojis at his age. Look, then, Advocate,
Exactly.
let's talk about the options for Mengo. I'm glad you spoke about remedial action from her side, whom we understand her legal team has, of course, already expressed intent to challenge the decision. What are the possible outcomes, you think, from that particular process?
So I think what is going to require for me is that we need as many organizations and feminist organizations that are doing this work to join the Legal Resources Center to mount a credible review process, right? And be able to bring certain aspects of this case into light. And really, remember, you were dealing with Judge Mwepe, who was presiding of this tribunal. And if you looked at his comments, sometimes you realize that we are climbing a very steep hill here with people who don't have an appreciation of what is at stake and what sexual harassment is and how it manifests at different points, right? And for Judge Mwepe and the team that were part of this tribunal to say to us that they're only going to be dealing with facts and not consider a number of things that came up. right? It's a travesty for me. So one of the recourse that she has is that's the review process. But I think now that this report is going to be submitted to the Judicial Service Commission, nothing stops us from literally submitting a strong motivation on why the JSC should consider a different approach on this.
Wow, absolutely. Thank you so much, Advocate, for that sound analysis there. Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo on the verdict on Judge Mbenenge there, who was found not guilty of gross misconduct on his flirtatious relationship with the court secretary.